Welcome to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to give you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
Hey, listen up and don't skip over this. Before we get started, I want to let you know that I am giving away completely free copies of my latest best-selling book, The Only Skill That Matters. This book is going to teach you how to upgrade your memory, read faster, learn more, and conquer your dreams. And it contains all new content written for 2020. Now, again, I am giving away completely free copies of this book. All you need to do is pay shipping and handling. So to pick up your free copy as a listener of this podcast, visit freelearningbook.com. That's freelearningbook.com. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode, which was lovingly crafted thanks to a review from... Actually, I don't have another review. So if you haven't left a review yet, it is almost your last chance to have your review be read on the air. Please go ahead and leave us a review on iTunes so that I can read it out. We only have a few more episodes before the show comes to an end. On to today's episode, ladies and gents. Today you are in tune for a wonderful, wonderful episode. I'm joined by national bestselling author, international speaker, and life strategist, Valorie Burton. She's the founder and CEO of the Coaching and Positive Psychology Institute, and her life-changing message has an intriguing and research-based emphasis in the pioneering field of applied positive psychology. As I learned, that means the study of what happens when things go right with us. She teaches that resilience is a skill that can be learned, and anyone who wants to have fulfillment and high impact and success must learn it. Now, in this episode, we go wide. We talk about having emotional resilience during these very troubling times of political and social and economic unrest. We talk about how to maintain positivity and also how to take care of yourself during these times. And of course, we talk about the subject of her new book, which is guilt, and how to let go of the small and subtle guilt that is not only holding you back, but as I discovered in this episode, is behind so many of the bad decisions that we make in our lives. And just I, listening to her speak, was able to identify some of the really bad decisions that have led to a lot of unhappiness, and that, in fact, they were not bad judgment, but guilt behind them. So I think this is a massive, massive episode. I will inform you that I did lose my composure at one point during the episode. We got very deep and talked about some of the painful things that are going on in the world today, and both Valorie and I were very deeply moved. So I hope you can handle it. I'm sure you can. Enjoy this episode with Valorie Burton. Valorie Burton, how are you, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am doing pretty well.
Awesome. I'm really excited.
Yeah. So in light of the fact that we're in the middle of, all kinds of stuff going on in the world, and I got kids in school and all of that, other than that, it's all good.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I was telling my wife, if I weren't doing this podcast, it would be hard to maintain a positive and optimistic outlook. But I always have such uplifting and motivating guests that it's been a blessing to be able to do these podcast episodes during this time.
Yeah, it definitely helps to have, people around you who are positive, and, it rubs off.
Totally. So, Valorie, I'm going to ask you the first question I like to ask, which is, tell me your origin story in as much or as little detail as you choose.
My origin story. Okay. Well, I grew up in an Air Force family. I was born in North Florida. Had the wonderful opportunity to live in Germany for 3 years as a kid before we moved to Colorado, which is where I consider home, even though I haven't lived there since my first year of college. But it's also where my husband and I originally connected. And we didn't really connect until 2012, years after we graduated high school, because we both happened to live in Atlanta, Georgia. And he found one of my books at the airport and tagged me on Facebook, and we had lunch, and the rest is history.
How funny.
So, yeah. So I started out my career in public relations and was running my own PR firm, but I really wasn't passionate about it. I was good at it. I wasn't passionate, and had an epiphany about my purpose, that I was supposed to be inspiring others to live more fulfilling lives through writing and speaking. And so I started writing, and now 13 books later, I'm still at it. And so I love what I do. I love how I get to help people. I love, really how life has unfolded. Even the bumps have gotten me to the right places.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Trace me through the evolution. 13 books is a lot of books. Trace me through the evolution of your message.
Well, I wrote the first book. I self-published it in 1999, and Random House picked it up the following year and then published it in 2001. And I just continued to write. So I started coaching after my first book because I was doing a lot of media, and they kept calling me a coach. And I kept going, no, I'm not a life coach. They're like, we have to call you something. And so I was like, well, let me at least see what this coaching thing is all about. And I realized that it was the one-on-one of what I was already writing and speaking about, and just a really powerful way to help people. But with my love of learning, I wanted more. I wanted more of a foundation. So I discovered positive psychology and went back to grad school at the University of Pennsylvania to study applied positive psychology, which is really the study of what happens when things go right with us. And so probably around book number 5, I really began incorporating a lot more positive psychology into my books. I speak from a faith perspective, and I love seeing how the science and the faith line up. That to me has been really, really fun, and really just an affirmation. And so that's it. Writing was not ever a thing for me that came quickly, although it was something I did well. And so for me, when I started writing, and each time I write and the words flow, I feel very much on purpose. It's kind of one of those confirmation things of, I think this is it. Because otherwise, the reason I didn't become a reporter is because writing on deadline was not appealing to me.
Right.
But with books, it works.
That's fascinating. So I would love to know, and I totally feel like you talked about faith. I feel like there's a reason that you and I connected today specifically, and we'll get into that and we'll digest some of the chaos that I think we've all been going through. But I'd love a little bit of background. We haven't talked too much about positive psychology on the show. We've talked about cognitive framing a little bit. I'd love a background for our audience and for me. What does positive psychology mean to you?
So, traditional psychology is so very important, and we tend to think of it as fixing what's wrong with us, right? Fixing the anxiety, the depression, oftentimes, just mental illness issues. And positive psychology is really the study of what happens when things go right. When we are happy, when we're tapping into our strengths, when we are resilient. For me, positive psychology is really about human flourishing, and how do we live well? How do we get through difficulties and not just kind of be at this place of functioning, but of actually thriving?
That's really interesting, because typically I think people come to, my worldview around learning and everything is people come to a book to solve a problem, whether that problem is boredom in the case of reading a fiction book, or, marital problems in the case of a relationship book. Right now, I'm reading a lot of books on parenting in anticipation of becoming a father.
Exciting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. But you're saying a lot of what your work does is not problem oriented. It's rather, or is it the problem of I'm just living, I'm not thriving?
Yeah, I think that's a problem.
I'd agree.
When people are feeling, whether it is, what is the meaning of what I'm going through? What is my purpose? How can I make a positive impact on the world? What are my strengths? We can so often focus on what's wrong and what are our weaknesses and how do I fix those, as opposed to what do I do well? What comes naturally? What are my strengths? And how could I use those to overcome my challenges? It's just a slightly different way of looking at the world and looking at what we want to see different. So I think problem is a word that could be used. I probably use the word challenges more, but I mean, whatever works.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of challenges are problems. But the question is, where are you trying to go? So I'm not so much focused on, why are you having that problem? While that might be important to know the answer to, ultimately the question is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do differently? What has worked in the past when you've been successful or things have gone well? How could you perhaps recreate some of those dynamics? So I don't think it's that it's not dealing with problems at all, but it's not therapy and counseling.
Right. That's a clear distinction. That makes a lot of sense. So folks come to you, as I understand it, who, I guess people use this buzzword now, mindset. Mindset has become this like huge buzzword in the same way that I think superfood became a buzzword 10 years ago. Would you say that mindset, or what people say when they use that buzzword mindset, is really about positive psychology and this kind of rewriting the mental patterns and behaviors and beliefs in the way that you're talking about it from a scientific perspective, having a degree in psychology?
Yeah, when I think mindset, I think of the work of Dr. Carol Dweck, who wrote the book Mindset, and the differences between a fixed and a growth mindset. That was really transformative because I had a fixed mindset in some areas. You can have a growth mindset in some areas and a fixed in others. And of course, a fixed mindset often comes along when we've been praised a lot for being smart or being talented, and we therefore don't value effort as much. We often will kind of shy away from challenges because we're afraid they're going to prove we're not as great as people think we are. So, for me, the idea of developing a growth mindset was huge. I would say the biggest area that it showed up for me was in relationships. Because I came from a divorced household. My parents divorced actually my first year of college, but they had been separated when I was in high school. And when I found myself going through divorce in my 30s, I knew I wanted happy marriage and family. But I had this fixed mindset that was like, yeah, maybe you just didn't learn that. Maybe this is something you're just not good at, right? And I realized that was a fixed mindset. And I decided to have a growth mindset. Yes, perhaps things have not worked out the way I've wanted in the past, but that doesn't mean with more effort and learning and reaching out to people that I see as good relationship role models that I can't make better choices and get to the vision in terms of relationships and family that I want. That was huge for me because we have, we can repeat these things in our mind over and over again about what we're good at and what we're not, what we can have and what we can't. And even when you decide to change how you talk to yourself, you might not really believe what you're saying at first. I didn't fully feel it, but I just kept saying it. And eventually my feelings caught up with my actions. So mindset, I think, is tremendously important because it opens us up to new possibilities. And it allows us to say, I can fail at this and I can learn and I can keep going. And to me, that's hope.
It's huge. It's absolutely huge. My wife and I, our biggest conflict in our marriage was we didn't have the language to talk about it at first, but it was around mindset and me saying, why don't you try this? And her going, I'm not good at it. And until she read actually Mindset by Carol Dweck, which a friend of mine gave to her, we didn't have the language to say growth mindset or fixed mindset. And we did the digging, we dug into my childhood, we dug into her childhood. And exactly as you said, she'd always been praised for being so smart and a genius. And I had always been praised for effort, you did such a, you worked so hard at this and now look at the results,
Yes.
as opposed to you're a genius. And so we're still parsing through it. This isn't something that goes away overnight. And I've discovered, of course, as you said, I have a fixed mindset in some areas as well. Like I've convinced myself that it doesn't matter how hard I try. I have a terrible sense of direction and I always get lost if I don't use, the navigation, which is a total fixed mindset. And she has growth mindsets about things that I don't. So you're absolutely right. It's totally huge.
Yeah, it is.
Now, Valorie, I mentioned that I thought that it was maybe kismet talking with you, someone who's, devoted the majority of their career to psychology and understanding and also faith. And when you said that word, it clicked for me that this is, as Eckhart Tolle says, this is the exact right experience that I need to be having right now. I'm going to open up with you a little bit and you can feel free to use me as an example. But I think a lot of people are experiencing what I'm experiencing, which is a lot of loss of hope. Looking at the political situation in the United States, looking at how so many groups of people have been marginalized, whether it's women, whether it's minorities, looking at political situations all over the world, I'm usually a very optimistic person and very hopeful. And even I have just been so down. So I want to ask you, obviously there's a reason, I went to a psychologist once who said, or a psychiatrist, once who said, look, life can be sad and there's no cure for that. But at the same time, you want to maintain a certain level of indignation that allows you to act and make the world better, but you want to operate from a place of confidence and hope and optimism. So I want to ask you, Valorie, a very long-winded question, but I want to ask you how you're maintaining hope with everything that's going on. And regardless of what side of the political spectrum people are on, I think most people are unhappy with what's happening in a lot of countries in the world. As we're recording this right now, there's some crazy, crazy, horrific things going on in Hong Kong and in Belarus and in China. And so I'll leave it there.
Well, I think you're human because, when there's so much change, unrest, it's disconcerting. It's, it throws us off. I think that at the same time, especially when I look at the pandemic, it has caused us to slow down. It's forced it. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? There's certain things that just aren't possible, aren't happening right now. Travel, school, all of those types of things, which change your everyday routines. And if you push against it, like you're just angry, it doesn't change anything. So a lot of this to me is about surrendering and trusting God has a bigger plan, that we are not in control anyway, even though we often think we are. So a year ago, there were things you thought you were in control of. You weren't. In February,
right,
there were things we certainly thought were certain, even though clearly just a few weeks later, those things were completely uncertain. Well, they were uncertain in February too. We just thought they were certain.
Right.
So I have found going inward, praying, being willing to let go of the need to know. It's not comfortable, but the more you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, the less anxiety you will have. And the more you can be present with what is, right? Like my husband is here, our children. What's the opportunity in this challenge is the question I've been asking over and over again. And another question I've been asking is, looking back, say 5 years from now, what will I wish I had done? Because we can focus so much on the obstacles right in front of us that we don't see the big picture. And stepping into the shoes of your future self, looking back saying, I wish when I had that extra time I had, and you fill in the blank. Or rather than spending every day worried, I wish that I had let go, and I wish that I had connected more in my relationships. I wish I had not been so uptight that I was being difficult with people unnecessarily. I wish I had not wasted so much time worrying. I mean, your future self has the benefit of hindsight, right? And so being able to stop and really ponder that for a moment. And then lastly, I would say, a big a big part of growing your faith is building your bank of evidence, meaning you've been through some difficult times in your past and you're here. Don't forget that. You're already resilient. And so it really is about just saying, okay, it is what it is. How do I want to show up? And accepting that there are things beyond your control. And we know that the people who are more resilient and more successful have an internal locus of control rather than an external one. External one is like focused on the things you can do nothing about, whereas the internal locus of control is like, okay, what can I control in my life right now? Let me focus on those things.
Right. It's funny how that almost comes back to this growth mindset. A growth mindset says, you know what? I can learn to be better. Whereas a fixed mindset says, I had bad teachers in math, so I can't solve this problem. And I'm with you completely on the piece of acceptance. Funny thing is I've so managed to do it for the recession and coronavirus. What really broke me was people suffering, people's political freedoms, especially. And it's hard. It's hard to go into that place because you want to maintain, as you said, you want to maintain an ability to show up. You don't want to zen yourself into complacence, of course. And you still want to do the right thing. You want to be active and you want to be involved. And yet you do need to accept that this is the situation and act. I love, as you said, it's first acceptance and then action.
Yeah. And I will say that even with all of the racial unrest and, around police brutality and so forth. So we have to also remember these things take an emotional toll. I guess it was Memorial Day when George Floyd was murdered. And I did a Facebook Live that week because it was so volatile and it was so painful. And, I didn't hop on right away. I didn't say anything right away, in part because I needed to process for myself. Mm-hmm. As an African-American, oftentimes, and maybe others in other groups feel this way too, but I'm unable to watch the videos, at least not immediately. I used to, but, back in 2016, when there were several of these instances, I was having nightmares. And, there's research around the PTSD that many African Americans deal with just from the videos.
Yeah.
So number one, when you're dealing with feeling just emotionally drained from these things, give yourself a break. You may need some extra rest. You may need a nap. You may need to call people that can hear you and listen to you vent and express whatever you need to express because it's healthy. So knowing that you may need some additional things that in your everyday life, when things are not so volatile, you might not need. Yeah. And then saying, okay, is there something for me to do differently? I began not only wanting to support friends who felt affected because they are brown, but also asking friends who are white to be willing to have these conversations.
Yes.
And, let's talk truthfully about our history. I mean, I really believe that's a big part of why the country has the issues that it has. We've not ever taught the full history. And so you've got groups of people who don't know what really happened and groups of people that may know a bit more and have completely conflicting opinions about how the country should move forward. Or even want others to forget, things that have happened, which, I'm not going to forget, it's my ancestry. So I think we have to give ourselves some grace. I also think we all in that area have to have some racial empathy, which I think is lacking, to be able to give people the benefit of the doubt is one of the things I've talked about. People are trying to understand or trying to be a help, and they say something that's they didn't say it quite the right way. Let's give some grace and have honest conversations without attacking one another, because most people want the country to go in a better direction. Most people want to get along with one another. They may be ignorant of what it feels like to be in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
But I mean, and maybe that's my optimism speaking, but I truly believe that with all my heart, that most people are not out to just be evil,
Right.
but may need to open their ears to hear other perspectives.
Thank you for sharing that, Valorie. It's so it's almost in a way concerning to hear, because I think a lot of us who have done the work, as you and I and people who listen to this podcast, we've done the work and we know that our emotions are our responsibility. And so when something is so overpoweringly sad and just awful, we feel like we have a responsibility to be positive. And it's hard, let me tell you.
And we can't always be positive, and that's okay. But I think that we can be empathetic. What I've always wanted and what I feel a responsibility to, and the reason I don't just jump out on social media or sending emails or et cetera when things immediately happen, is because I want to be helpful, which means I have to process for myself first before I throw my emotions on everybody else. And that brings me anxiety because I feel like I need to respond. But I feel the responsibility to respond in a way that helps a person shift their perspective and have a positive influence on their network.
Right.
Not to just be angry. I can be angry, but I also want to be helpful. And so I think, when you have a sphere of influence, and we all do, we have to think about, especially in this age of social media, how what we put out there impacts the people who come in contact with us. Mm-hmm. And no, I mean, I see more people trying to use their voice in positive ways. I think that's important. I certainly see a lot more white people using their voice that I didn't see. I mean, 10 years ago, I just didn't see it. If these kinds of issues came up, I would feel that my brown friends and family would be talking about their pain, talking about their frustration, and everyone else was silent. That is a shift I've seen in the last couple of years that I think is really tremendous. Yeah, even when the country is so divided, that gives me hope.
All right, let's take a quick pause and thank this episode's sponsor, BlueBlock's blue light blocking glasses, the only blue light blocking company in the world that create evidence-backed lenses for filtering blue and green light. Their Australian lab-built lens technology is fitted into the most fashionable frames, and they can even make prescription and reading glasses in their optics lab. So whether you want to wear their Sleep Plus glasses that block 100% of blue and green light, their Summer Glow mood booster glasses, or even blue light computer glasses that don't have a yellow tint, BlueBlocks has you covered. Now, I like to wear the Sleep Plus glasses 2 to 3 hours before bed, and they really, really help your sleep. I also like to wear the daytime ones for reducing digital eye strain, headaches, and lowering stress. Now, BlueBlocks has free and fast worldwide shipping, and if you use code SUPERHUMAN at checkout, you can get 15% off any pair that you want. Just go to blueblocks.com, that's BLUBLOX.com, and enter code SUPERHUMAN to save 15%. All right, let's get back to the episode. It's reassuring, and it's a step. It's a step in the right direction, and it's reassuring to know that it's okay to not be positive in this situation. And yeah, I have nothing more to add. I mean, thank you for that. Now, I do want to talk about your new book, which is maybe also something that I'm going through. You are releasing a book on September 1st. Called Let Go of the Guilt. Stop beating yourself up and take back your joy. Now, I have an interesting story about guilt, which is 6 months ago or so, I decided that I was working too hard and I want to take more time for family and I want to ratchet things back. And I was wildly successful at doing it. And I've been working 1 to 2 days a week. And the irony of the human condition is I have so much guilt about it, Valorie, that I'm carrying around. Why aren't you working? Why aren't you producing? And I just thought to myself, it's so ironic. Like I've achieved exactly what I wanted, out of a previous state of guilt, which is you're working too hard and not spending enough time with family. So it's just, this is the right time for this conversation. Tell me about the book.
Okay. So now I'm immediately wanting to coach you. So many of us feel what I call false guilt, which is, guilt is an indication that we've done something wrong or we've caused harm, right? But false guilt is the feeling that we've done something wrong or caused harm, even though perhaps we haven't. Both of them produce these guilty feelings. And the really big concern then is, what do you do as a result of these feelings? It can drive your decisions and the actions that you take. So being able to notice it when it's happening, to stop it, and make sure that it's not guiding your decisions, your reactions, it's not causing you to be manipulated, et cetera, is so very important. So that's how I came to write the book. I think so many of us beat ourselves up. We second guess, we overcompensate, we let people take us on guilt trips, and we don't talk about it really. I mean, it's this something that's going on. You feel it, and it's a weight, but you might not verbalize it. Like, you took the time off, and it's going great. And yet there's this nagging, like, I'm doing something wrong here.
Yeah. How funny is that, right? We are such bizarre creatures, humans. It's like we just can't ever be, and be happy. Now, I know a lot of your audience, the people who resonate most with you, are women who I think especially suffer from this false guilt. Am I right?
Absolutely. I have a whole chapter in the book called The Guilt Gender Gap.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
Well, women are more guilt prone for a number of reasons. One, we feel emotions more intensely than men do. We have more complex emotions. So we feel higher highs. We feel happier when we're happy. We feel more sad when we're sad than men do. But we also read emotions more clearly. We're always thinking about what other people are thinking and feeling. We're very relational. Women tend to be more empathetic, not trying to make the guys sound terrible, but this is just what research shows us over time about women. And actually, one of the most interesting pieces of research came out of Spain that said that men may be guilt deficient until later in life, like starting in their 50s. And if you think about this idea of not being as empathetic, then that would naturally mean if you're not if you're not feeling what someone else is feeling, you may not be as quick to notice when what you've done has caused them to feel negatively in some way. So if you don't sense that, then you're not going to feel guilty. So there's just a lot for women. We worry more. And I think we have increased expectations, and that causes a lot of internal conflict. Increased expectations about what we should be accomplishing professionally, what we should be doing at home, what our kids should look like, even down to what we ought to look like. And then you add the layer, the modern layer of social media that's showing you what your life ought to look like. And if you're not measuring up, you can feel like you're doing something wrong. And again, feeling like you're doing something wrong produces guilt. So there are a lot of things mixed up in this. And it's not just women, but I believe among women, guilt is epidemic. When I speak to women, and this is where this topic actually came up, was a speaking engagement when I talked about my own guilt. You don't even have to say anything, but you ever feel guilt and you just get this, oh yeah, well, of course I do. I mean, it's sad. So many women, even when we get to where we want to be, feel guilty about their ambition, feel guilty about the time that they do or don't spend with whether it's their kids, their aging parents. You just fill in the blank. We are far more likely to apologize. I was on a plane a while back, and this young woman was walking through the aisle, and she apologized basically to every person that she was walking past as she's boarding the plane. I'm like, what are you apologizing for? Like, we're all trying to get through with our luggage. She's like, sorry. And it's like apologizing just for taking up space. And so I think for women, it does tend to be more of a problem.
Absolutely. And I have a degree in sociology, and I did a lot of work in sociology of gender. And there's some incredible monologues around women and the word sorry that maybe we'll link in this podcast episode if I manage to find them, but just eye-opening situations where women have felt compelled to say sorry that make you realize that this is endemic. It's a real problem. Now, I firmly believe, Valorie, that in order for people to absorb the how, they need to understand the why, or the why it's important. So I'll ask a naive question, which is, why is this guilt a problem? What are the repercussions of living with this guilt?
Well, besides the emotion, or it's taking away your joy, right? Which is huge. First of all, we know that positive emotion actually expands your ability to deal with adversity and stress. It makes you more resilient. It strengthens your immune system, causes you to live longer. Even research around, people with more positive emotion being more likely to get raises and get promoted. There are so many good things that happen when we have joy, when we are happy. But as I said a moment ago, if you allow guilt to get in the driver's seat as you make decisions, you're going to make a lot of inauthentic decisions. You are going to do things that may not even line up with your own values out of guilt. You could decide, I should be working more. Maybe I've overdone it. And go back to a schedule that's not what you were meant to be doing. Guilt, my goodness, I tell so many stories in the book of not just from my own life, but from the lives of so many other people of, marrying out of guilt, spending money out of guilt, meaning, for example, this came up actually quite a bit, women who were the first in their families to graduate from college, or the most successful in their families. And then there's this expectation that they're supposed to take care of everyone's problems. And so out of guilt, they just keep doing it rather than exercising a bit of tough love. People who are single parents who feel guilty about the other parent not being as present, and so doing things for their kids purely out of guilt, even when they know that discipline is the better option, and then later on realizing their mistake because they didn't teach the kids what they really wanted to teach them. What they were teaching them was, mommy or daddy, depends on who the single parent is, feels guilty, and therefore they're going to let me get away with things. And so I'm entitled to get away with things because I'm at a disadvantage because of this other parent. I mean, there's any number of things you can fill in the blank. And then the parent feels guilty about that, right?
Right.
And so really noticing the ways in which guilt leads to decisions that are counterproductive and self-sabotaging is where this really, really is important. And it takes some self-reflection. And I go through a whole process in the book of how to be self-reflective when you are feeling guilt. One of the first things that you can do is simply label the emotion. There's some great research out of UCLA about affect labeling. Basically, when you're feeling an emotion that might tempt you to go in a direction that's different than what you want, just labeling it. So when you feel that guilt, saying that's guilt, it's an interruption to your thought process that helps you to step back. And rather than having some kind of automatic reaction that you're going to regret, you're able to be more thoughtful and actually respond to whatever the scenario is you're dealing with.
That's a fantastic tip. And also really eye-opening, just that guilt can influence us into behaving in ways that are not congruent with the way we actually want to behave. What else can we do to start putting a stop to this guilt? I'm sure there's a lot covered in the book, which people can pick up the day this episode comes out. But what are some of the things that we can do to start nipping this thing in the bud?
Well, pushing back against it. So, once you said that's guilt, asking, for example, you came up with this great schedule. I love it. I love that you're working 1 or 2 days a week, but then feeling guilty about it. So I'm just going to ask you, Jonathan, what are you feeling is wrong about this new schedule?
See, that's the absurdity. I just feel like I should be working more. There haven't been repercussions. My team is handling, the work. And it's more, I feel guilty around other people who are working and I'm not.
Okay. So you've said a whole bunch of stuff right there, just in a couple of sentences. Yep. So number one, should is a telltale sign of feeling guilty, right? You said, I should be working more. Okay. So I also talk in the book about expectations. And one of the expectations that sets us up for guilt is the vague expectation. I should be working more is very vague because I don't care how much you work, you could always be working more.
Yes.
Therefore, you are always set up for guilt. I mean, the same is true of like, I should be exercising more. I should spend more time with, and you fill in the blank of who that person is. And it's so vague that you always fall short because it's just more. When is it enough? So that's the question that I would ask of you. How much is enough to get the work done that you are meant to be doing?
Yeah, that's a very salient point, and it's something that I've never really addressed or defined. And perhaps it's, as long as I meet these 3 milestones or these 3, I work in crucial results. So if I hit my crucial results for the week, there's really no reason to sit at a desk anymore.
And that's it. So, I would take that and I would put those 3 crucial results somewhere I see it. I'd check them off.
Right.
I'm done.
Yep.
I've done it. I've met the expectation. There's no need for guilt. But as long as the expectation is just, I should work more, I would keep pushing back on it. And what is the reason I should work more? Well, I've achieved what I already said I was setting out to achieve. I'm done. And so when you look at that, what you're really looking at is, I think, the values that our society has set up. You should work 5 days a week. You should work 40 hours. It says who? For what purpose? Because there are a lot of people that are at work 40 hours a week. They're not producing a whole lot. They're not getting, as you say, crucial results accomplished, right? But they could check off the box that they worked 5 days, 40 hours. But what does that really mean? You have a different set of values, and your values are around getting results. And once you get those results, you can go use your time doing something other than work, which lines up with your values. So a big part of guilt is owning your values. And that means you've got to get clear about what those values are and be unapologetic about those values.
Yes, I love the unapologetic piece. One of the things I teach in my productivity course is being unapologetic about saying no. It's like once you've defined your values and you know what you want to do, and you gave this wonderful example of people being expected to just take care of everyone because they have their life more together than everyone else. And there's certainly something to be said about compassion and looking after others. But at some point, you need to set clear boundaries and say no. And in some sense, I think we also have to set clear boundaries for ourselves and say, I'm unapologetic about this. I don't need to apologize to myself or to anyone else that I'm working 2 days this week and I got everything done. There's no apology. There's no guilt. I love that. I feel like this was just the right conversation I needed, Valorie.
Good. That was a great example. And I relate to it because when I said, I'd be out talking to women about, guilt, my speaking engagements, I was talking about my work, about the vision I had for being an author, happy marriage with family, and having this business that allowed me flexibility. And then when I had all of that, I felt guilty. I had this refrain, like, you're not staying at home with your kids. I was like, but that wasn't even the vision. That wasn't
even the plan.
That's what my husband said to me. He's like, what are you talking about? I thought you were really clear about what you're doing. And besides, Alex, our son, he's like, he loves his friends at preschool. I don't think he wants to be at home with you all day. You're a great mom. Like, he had to say it to me. And when he said to me, wasn't this your own vision? I was like, oh yeah, why am I feeling guilty? So I think sometimes we sabotage our own happiness by, throwing in a side of guilt or something else, sometimes out of our own fear, our fear that maybe this isn't going to last. So I'm not going to make it feel too good. Because if it feels too good, maybe it's not going to keep going. I mean, I think that's a little piece of the guilt as well, especially in those situations where it's completely false guilt.
It's funny. It's like so many things in psychology. Now that I'm aware of this, thanks to this conversation, I'm looking back and I'm like, what got me into the situation of working so much I wasn't happy in the first place? And it was guilt. It was like, I should be doing more for my audience or for people, or, I should be writing more. I should be publishing more. And that was guilt. That wasn't even ambition on my part. So this is powerful stuff.
Wow.
It's powerful stuff. Now, the book is called Let Go of the Guilt. People can pick it up. We're going to release this episode on September 1st. So if you are hearing this, unless you're a member of my team and you have early access, but if you're hearing this, you can already pick up the book. But one way or another, you can pre-order it on Amazon or wherever else people can pick up books. Valorie, is there anything I should add to that?
Well, one thing I'm very excited about is I created some bonuses with the book. So if you get the book, make sure you go to valerieburton.com/guilt, or just go to valerieburton.com. I've got a free training on how to flip the guilt trip if you've got people that like to guilt trip you, and some other bonuses there when you get the book. So I don't want you to miss out on those.
This is a fantastic, fantastic book, I can tell you. And I think you'll probably be a bestseller in Israel because, we have the Jewish guilt, which is the highest, most evolved form of guilt. Everyone should go out there and buy this for their mother-in-law. I'm just kidding. But I'm really excited about the book. I think it's
not a bad
fantastic.
idea, actually.
Right? Valorie, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you today. And I really appreciate you getting real with me and going deep with me. I do want to thank you. And I want to first check, where can we send people? You said valerieburton.com/guilt. We're going to make sure that that is in the show notes. Social media handles, where should people find you?
It's at Valorie Burton, and Valorie is spelled like Valor, Valorie, but that's my handle on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook.
Love it. And folks, check out superhumanacademy.com for links to all that if you don't want to type it. And Valorie, the last question I always ask before the thanks is, if people take away one big message from this episode, from all the good stuff that you shared today, what do you hope for that message to be?
Oh gosh, what a great question. It would be this: your emotions are teachers. They're just trying to tell you something. So before you let your emotions get in the driver's seat and take over whatever your decisions are, just step back and say, what's this trying to tell me? Like, get self-reflective. It can change absolutely everything.
I love that. Valorie Burton, thank you so much for coming on today. This was an absolute blast.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation, Jonathan.
Thanks for tuning in to the award-winning Superhuman Academy podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit superhuman.blog. While you're at it, please take a moment to share this episode with a friend and leave us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week.